introduce our speaker?
I would be happy to. So I don't know how I ever found out about Erik in the first place, but when I was going to Rocky Mountain National Park in 2009 to be an artist in residence there in mid-July, I had found out about Erik, and one of my missions when I was there to go was to go visit his images of RMMP gallery in Estes Park. And I think one of the things that drew me to Erik was his way of really spending a lot of time to capture a sense of place. And if you follow his work and you go to his website and you get some of his books, you see that he really does explore every single part of Rocky Mountain National Park. And he explores all of its different personalities and all of its different seasons. And it's not like you're seeing the same type of landscape photo again and again, but he really does try to uniquely capture the place. So that's why I'm really excited to introduce him to give a talk about his work living in and around Rocky Mountain National Park. And I also want to mention too that he is one of the founders of Nature First. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Nature First, but imagine the NANPA ethical field guidelines and just expand that concept even more to a more holistic approach about nature photography, where we don't harm nature as nature photographers as part of what we do. Naturefirst.org. But if you have any questions to ask him about that, I highly encourage you. But without any further ado, I would like to introduce Erik Stensland of Estes Park to talk to us about Rocky Mountain National Park. Go ahead, Erik.
All right. Thank you, Carl. It's a pleasure to be in Alaska today. So it's I was out skiing today as well. So, we do have some snow, but nothing quite like what you have already. Well, Carl wants me to tell a little bit of my life in Rocky Mountain National Park and a little bit about the business that I run as well. And so I'll get started here. Let's see if I can find my, let's see, we're going to go in here and there we go. All right. Well, just to get started, tell you a little bit about myself. I finished college and took a rather unusual turn, just to kind of give you some background. I moved off to Austria right after college and then met my wife in Poland, and then we got married and moved to Bulgaria and lived in Bulgaria for a year or so, and then finally got to where I've been headed since I was a teenager, which was the country of Albania. And I don't know if you're familiar with Albania, but it was very much like North Korea is today, a very extreme communist dictatorship. And the country had just opened up, and we got moved in and were involved in helping that country get back on its feet. I ran an ecotourism program, helping to create jobs. I did work with local artists, helping them develop their artwork and market it. Had a bookstore and English courses and did all sorts of crazy things until Kosovo exploded. And I'd been watching that for many, many years, and it exploded and 600,000 refugees poured across the border. And I ended up setting up a refugee agency, brought together the various churches in Albania and brought in outside help and started training them to work with refugees. And before I knew it, we were the largest refugee agency during the Kosovo War, with a primary responsibility for 30,000 refugees, and worked very closely with the United Nations and Médecins Sans Frontières and a lot of other organizations. But I was wearing out. It was rather a stressful time, years in the Balkans, avoiding bandits and death threats on a regular basis and all sorts of fun things. And then after the war, best friend died, had a heart attack while we were working out there together, and leaving his wife and small kids. And that added a little more stress to my life and sadness. And I was then asked to go to Kosovo and lead an initiative to help coordinate a lot of different small nonprofits. So I moved to Kosovo with my wife, and we started an organization coordinating about 135 nonprofits. And I think that after 3 years of that, that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. And I just knew I was burned out. My father had died at 42 from stress-related issues, and I saw I was headed that way, starting to have health issues, and decided it's time to take a break. And 2 days later, a friend of mine walked up to me and said, "Hey, I have my wife's cousin is building a house at the edge of Rocky Mountain National Park. And she has a basement and wants to rent it out. Do you know anyone over here in Kosovo that would be interested in getting away for a while and renting a place?" And I said, "Yeah, I know exactly who would love that." And so about 6 months later, we moved to the little town of Estes Park, Colorado, at the edge of Rocky Mountain National Park. Walk out my door onto trails, and it was rather magnificent. I came with the idea I was going to take a year away and work on an online master's program in organizational development. But shortly after arriving, I just realized I was a mess. This years of stress had taken their toll, and I needed to get away. And then that meant stepping away from the organization I was working with, which meant I needed to get a job. And I did not want to do something that was going to add to that stress. I needed to be restored. And I knew the one thing that restored me was time in the natural world. And so I decided I needed to find a way to get paid to hike. And so I started looking at my options. It was going to be thought about the Park Service, but knew they would put me in an office. Thought about being a mountain guide, but I knew nothing about the mountains. And the idea of having a gaggle of people with me sounded horrible. And so I eventually saw all these nice photographs in town and thought, well, somebody takes these, maybe I could do that. And I remember wandering into one of the galleries in town and looking at the photos, and then talking to one of the owners and saying, I need a change of life. I'm thinking maybe I should become a landscape photographer and make photos like these. What do you think? And they said, "Oh, that's a bad idea." They said it's from their years of experience, they were almost positive it would be impossible to make a living as a full-time nature photographer in Estes Park, Colorado. And so that night I decided that's what I'm going to do. That sounds like a good challenge. And so I decided to become a landscape photographer. I knew nothing about the natural world, really knew nothing about photography. And I remember going online and looking up to see if there were other photographers in the area. And sure enough, there was a group called Nature Photographers Network. And they had a chapter in Colorado, and some of them were going to be meeting up at a place called Dream Lake on this cold January morning. And so I trudged up there through the snow with my jeans and, moon boots, old foam boots, and had no idea what I was doing. I got up there and I had a little Nikon Coolpix, just a tiny little camera on a plastic tripod. And all the other photographers up there were with their 4x5 cameras and, were really professional, knew what they were doing. And as we started talking, they began to ask me, "Well, what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I've decided I'm going to become a professional nature photographer." And they all looked at me with kind of a smile and said, "Aha, okay, very good, very good." I think they thought I was a bit crazy, and I probably was, because I knew nothing. But so I find myself here at the edge of Rocky Mountain National Park, deciding to become a nature photographer. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Rocky Mountain National Park. I knew almost nothing about it, but I'd landed here off the airplane and trying to figure things out. And Rocky Mountain National Park is located about a 90-minute drive from Denver, Colorado. And it's, just up the hill from Boulder, Colorado. Rocky Mountain National Park is about 415 square miles. So it's a pretty small park compared to what you have up there in Alaska, but it's just the perfect size for me. It's about 20 miles across and about 25 miles long. It's one of the busiest national parks in the United States. part of the reason for that is just below the park, down near Boulder and Denver, it's just one big long city stretching almost from the Wyoming border in the north to the New Mexico border in the south. And we've got a population of 5 million living just down below the park. But we also get lots of visitors from Texas, from Oklahoma and Kansas and Nebraska, people that live out on the Great Plains and want to come up to the mountains. And so we're just right up in the mountains, not far from the Great Plains. Rocky Mountain National Park I should be showing you pictures, shouldn't I? I keep forgetting. All right, if I do this again, somebody put your microphone on and say, Erik, remember you have slides. But Rocky Mountain National Park is a hiker's park. We have about 350 miles of hiking trails taking you throughout the national park. A lot of beautiful areas to see. And we've got 60 peaks over 12,000 feet. A third of the park is actually alpine tundra, very similar to what you will find up in Alaska. Many of these plant species I'm told, are very similar as well. But here in Rocky Mountain National Park, the tundra begins at about 10,500 feet above sea level. And 1/3 of the national park is at that elevation, and so is tundra. And so on average, Rocky Mountain National Park has the highest elevation of, I think, just about any national park in the United States. We've got 60 different species of mammals. We're probably most well known for our elk. We have hundreds of elk roaming the park in giant herds. I'll oftentimes see them just outside my window in the morning. I live right next to the park. We have moose and bighorn sheep, black bear. We don't have any grizzly. We have pika and ptarmigan. I don't know if you're familiar with the ptarmigans. They're sort of our version of the penguin. They love the cold weather. We've got mountain lions and a lot of different wildlife here roaming the park. And so it is feeling like a very wild place. 94% of Rocky Mountain National Park is designated wilderness. And so which took 30 years to get it through Congress to have them agree that those lands would never be built upon or have any trail work or any work done apart from on those trails. And so Rocky Mountain National Park is this bit of wilderness not too far from the city. And it's a bit of wilderness that I had dropped into and knew nothing about. One of the things that really has defined this park over the last year is an increase in visitation. Since 2012, we've seen a 44% increase in visitation, just crowds and crowds of people pouring into the national park. We've seen congestion on the roads, as you can see here, on trails where people just stand in line, walking from place to place.
Erik, I'm still seeing just your thumbnails.
Really? Thumbnails? Oh, interesting. Why is it not showing my full photo?
Yeah, it's not showing just the thumbnails. That's it. That's all we're getting here.
Oh, that's a real shame. Okay.
So do you have a 2-monitor setup, Erik?
Here we go. Let's try this.
You've probably selected the monitor that has the thumbnails.
There we go.
Is that better?
Yes.
All right. We'll let you see what you're missing there, but thank you. Thank you.
Oh yeah, that's much better. Thank you very much.
No, I appreciate that.
Oh, and Erik, the willow ptarmigan is our state bird.
Oh, is it? See, I know nothing. I was so nervous about this presentation. I think these Alaska guys, I'm talking to them about wilderness. This is ridiculous. And your state bird, great. Well, we've got them too. So, but yeah, we've been overrun by tourists over this last time, visitors from all over. And it's really put a stress on the park. And now they've had to make adjustments. We now have a timed entry permit. I actually need to get a permit for every day I go in the park during the summer season. We've got the warming climate. This is, hitting everyone. Our pika population is especially vulnerable, and we're worried we're going to lose them completely as they don't survive very well above about 78 degrees, and our high elevation areas are often hitting above that during July and August. But the other thing that's interesting about Rocky is we are facing a lot of wildfires. In 2020, we had the largest wildfire in Colorado history come about 10 miles north of my town, and it took out a good part of the northern part of the park. And then in October, we had another fire come move through, and it became the second largest fire in Colorado. And that one moved 40 miles in one day, 24 hours, and came to within a mile and a half of my house and took out a huge swath of the national park. And so we're dealing with that now of, a lot of burn area, a lot of issues with that, and realizing that we're going to be in wildfire country for the foreseeable future. But so anyways, I found myself in Rocky Mountain National Park, deciding to be a photographer, but knew nothing about it. And so what I did is I started by researching, and I started by looking around at all the different people that were selling photography in the area, and realized some people were selling pictures of well-known places in Rocky Mountain National Park, and then they would have Arches National Park and Zion National Park and the Great Plains. And I realized that nobody was focusing on Rocky Mountain National Park. And yet at that time, we had 3 million visitors to the park. So I decided what I needed to do was to provide all of these visitors the single source to find all your pictures of Rocky Mountain National Park. And so I decided I would need to become sort of Mr. Rocky Mountain National Park, even though I knew nothing about this place. As I dug into it, I found out that most photographers avoided this national park. They found it difficult to photograph, and they felt like there were just almost no iconic views, and it was a difficult place to shoot, and the weather was tough to work with here. Clear skies so much of the summer, and high winds during much of the year. So I thought, okay, I've got some work cut out for me. And so I set out to slowly photograph and to visit every little corner of the park. And I took out a map and I started marking off, okay, I've hiked here, I've hiked here, and I would filling in all the spots on the map over the years. Over these years, I probably hiked well over 10,000 miles just in this little park. I've hiked every trail many, many times, just about every trail in the dark, probably, maybe just a couple I haven't done in the dark. I've hiked alongside nearly every stream, every valley, just about every little tarn and lake and mountain I've been on. And over these years of climbing into all of these places and looking around, I slowly began to understand a little bit about how the natural world worked, and about what this place was, this Rocky Mountain National Park. I started to fall in love with it and recognize its moods and its changes through the seasons and the challenges that it faced. And over the years, as just going out constantly, spending time out there and building friendships with park rangers and park leaders, I fell in love with this place and began to just delight in it. I have spent so many morning sunrises in the middle of nowhere, areas far off the trail that almost no one visits. Maybe 2 people, 3 people in a year might get to some of these places and get to watch the sunrise, and finding views that just have never been photographed before. I head out and I have entire valleys to myself where there's just not another person. I know you can find that in Alaska, but finding it here in the lower 48 can be a real challenge. But I'm finding that there's so many little nooks and crannies in this park. Getting to see perspectives almost no one sees. I'm out all seasons of the year on skis, usually in the winter, heading up high onto the mountains, sometimes by moonlight. That's one of my favorite things, is skiing out, on top of the mountains at moonlight when the winds are blowing less than 30 or 40 miles an hour. Today they're getting close to 50. So and I found, as I've spent these years out there, I've started to understand not just what's going to happen each week of the year and how things are going to change, but I know when the vegetation is going to be at its peak, when an area is likely to light, which valleys will light during which weeks. And, I find scenes out there and think, boy, this would make a beautiful photograph, if only, and a scene like this, I think this one took me 9 years of trying. You go back again and again and again, waiting for the leaves to be in at peak color, waiting for some dramatic light, hoping that there's no wind, all of these different factors you need to get together. I was just thinking, I have another photograph. I have many photographs have taken me a decade or so, but I have one that took me 14 years to get. I saw the place many, many years ago, made notes and said, okay, I've got to be here. And it's 10 miles back from the nearest trailhead. Sunrise is at 5 a.m. during the 5:20 or so, during the peak time when the flowers are ready. And so, it's a 1 a.m. departure time to get up there. And did that again and again, 14 years. And eventually I did get that picture. But, because I focused on one little park, it's enabled me to get to know it in a way that almost no one else is able to, who just visits from time to time. And there's a lot of advantages to spending time in a single place and getting to know it well. I know when the flowers are likely to bloom in just about every valley of the park. And, just about every mountain in there, I know its name. I know what it looks like from different angles. I know, I feel like I'm in my own backyard whenever I'm, and it is my backyard, but it's almost like wandering the house at night. I'm out there in the middle of the night in the woods somewhere. I know exactly where I am. And it's just a delight to know somewhere so well that you have this deep connection with it. Over this time, I've had lots of wonderful experiences and some really weird experiences. With all the visitors that we have, millions of visitors to this park, you see all sorts of things. I remember one Christmas, I went out for just a short hike. And as I'm hiking up through the snow, I see these people ahead of me, and they're in full Arctic gear. I mean, just like you would have in northern Alaska, the full goggles and masks and everything, giant jackets. And, they weren't that far out. It was like 20 degrees and gently snowing. So I thought, I got to find out what they're up to. So I marched my way up and catch up with them. And they sat down on a log, and I came up and introduced myself and found out they were from Miami, had never been in the mountains before, were really scared and nervous. And we start chatting, and something caught the corner of my eye, and I looked down and I see this horn of an antler of an elk. And as we're talking, I start following the antler and realize that the log they're sitting on is actually a frozen elk. And I start looking around because I realize there's likely a mountain lion not too far away. And as I mentioned it to them, they jump. I don't know how high they flew in the air. Once they realized that they were sitting on a dead elk, they ran down the trail, and I bet they've never gone in the woods again. But, I find lost hikers, and I find people with altitude issues, trying to help them. I've been chased off the tundra by lightning. I remember this evening we had just an intense lightning storm up in the tundra, made for great pictures, but not a real safe place to be. I think just a few weeks earlier, we had lost 3 people up on that area due to lightning strikes. But I've been chased by moose, mad moose. I bet you guys have too. Chased around trees, and had them stalking my tent, and charging me in fields, or, come around a corner around midnight and, you've got a big bull elk standing in the trail looking at you. Um, run into mountain lions on the trail in the middle of the night, or, all sorts of fun things. Sometimes I'll climb up to mountains up to the top of our mountains, 13, 14,000 feet high, in order to get a picture for sunrise or sunset. And sometimes, like on this night, I was out there and got my photograph for sunset, but then on my way down, couldn't find the way to get down safely. It was all just a big black hole, and almost got trapped up there for the night because there's no path. It wasn't clear where to get down. And, things like that happen all the time. Or you're climbing on cliff edges and trying to get up to some remote lake, and you get stuck from time to time. A lot of things I just don't tell my wife. She's happy not to know. In fact, well, she somewhat knows. I had one evening where I was hiking out way up in the tundra in the middle of the night in the winter, and I slipped on some ice and tore a ligament, and didn't show up when I was supposed to back home that night. And I ended up having to crawl my way out about 5 miles, much of it through waist deep snow. And about 2 days later, she made me purchase a satellite tracking device so she could at least see where my body was in case they needed to call in the search crews. But yeah, for me, spending time in one little place and getting to know it so intimately, there's a lot of adventures, there's a lot of joy, there's a lot of learning about these places. When you see things again and again, you begin to slowly understand how things work and what's happening in the natural world. So I spent those years out photographing. But in terms of my business, you might be wondering, well, how did you go from knowing nothing to actually running a business? Well, the first thing I did is I went to the local library and I sat down with a stack of books, both photography books and paintings and other art books, and tried to find nature images that spoke to me. And I would look at them and try and figure out which angle the light was coming from and how they were composed. And then I would go out and practice, and made some friends who would just tear my work apart, and I would just keep working to improve it. But I started within about a month or so of making some small greeting cards and selling those at the local Hallmark store. And then I moved from selling greeting cards to making matted prints by that winter that I would sell in a few different stores. And then by the first spring, I started doing art shows, going out and selling my work. And I'm missing slides here. And eventually, by the third year, it was time to open my own gallery. And so this is our little town of Estes Park. You can't really see the mountains behind it because they're all covered in clouds, but my gallery is just down on that little main street. But yeah, I opened my first gallery in 2007. And when I had my grand opening, I invited those same friends from NPN who I had met up at Dream Lake those years before. And they're all good friends now, but they just shook their head and couldn't believe that. How did you do that in 3 years? That's ridiculous. Now, my pictures weren't all that great, but I was making it work somehow, and figured I knew how to market, and I would figure out how to improve my photography as I went. But it went from selling prints through my gallery to eventually someone came up and asked if I would be interested in doing a book they had a publishing company, and whether I'd be interested in doing a book. And so we did a little book. I didn't have any creative control in that book. They did it. And so I decided the next one I'm going to do. And so I started learning how to write and produce books. And there's my gallery there. And so I started writing books about the national park. And eventually the books grew into, I think I've got 7 titles and calendars and note cards and different things, and ended up needing to start my own publishing business as a result of that. A lot of different types of books that I've done, and I've got a lot more on my list that I'm working on. But yeah, so started writing my own books, launched my own publishing business, and from there, I ended up opening additional galleries. This was one in Grand Lake on the west side of the national park. So where I am in Estes Park is the gateway to Rocky Mountain National Park on the east. And then I opened up eventually a gallery on the west side. And unfortunately, I had to close that last year because of that wildfire I talked about. It destroyed the home of the people that were running it. They went to Denver for the day, and when they came back, the police said, no, you can't go any further. And the fire took everything they owned. They didn't bring anything with them when they went out for the day. So they were not able to get the insurance coverage that they had hoped for their house. And so they ended up having to leave the state. So I've had to close that temporarily and hope to reopen it again soon. And then I've done a lot of photography, usually in April and November, the brown months here in Rocky, down in the desert Southwest. And so I eventually opened a gallery in New Mexico as well. But yeah, anyways, but my main focus is Rocky Mountain National Park. And as I've focused on it over the years, I've started to see a lot of the impacts that are happening, and especially a lot of the impacts with visitation. And slowly over these years, I've become known for my photography of Rocky Mountain National Park and for my books of Rocky Mountain National Park. And so locally, a lot of people identify me with Rocky Mountain National Park. And I've had the chance to be the speaker for their 100th anniversary celebration, and regularly talk about Rocky Mountain National Park. But I've realized that my influence can really be used, very local influence, can be used to educate people about this place and how we can all be better stewards of this very special national park. And so a couple of years ago, the Rocky Mountain Conservancy, which is the fundraising branch of the national park, came up to me and asked if I would create a hiking guide. They wanted one that they could give out they could sell to visitors and know that it would give the information about that would educate visitors and send them to official trails and help them to be good caretakers of this park. And so I ended up going out and writing a guide to the national park, about a 500-page guide, and then a smaller version of it as well. And that seems to have worked well, but it's about a third of the book is all about how to behave in the national park or how to behave in the wilderness, because we're finding so many people these days are coming from urban areas and really know nothing about the outdoors, just like I knew nothing at the beginning. And so it spends a lot of time just talking, how do we interact with wildlife? How do we interact with the delicate tundra? How do we, things that people just wouldn't know about if you grow up in a city. And so that's proving to be quite a popular book as well. And then I've used my social media platforms and things like that, trying to educate my own audience about how do we love the natural world and how do we take care of the natural world. And this past winter, I started a new website called RockyMountainNationalPark.com. And it's got, many, many, many pages, all sorts of information, basically everything you need to know. And we're working to make this sort of the main site that people come to who are planning their visit to Rocky Mountain National Park. And so I'm slowly building that up and trying to use a combination of my photography and writing to bring that together and use it to promote greater responsibility there. And What else have I done? A number of years ago, what was that? I think it was about 2012. I was, I'd spent years then. I started in 2004, and by 2012, I knew the park very well. And I remember one year I hiked up to this area about 6 miles back. I was there for sunrise, and I knew that it had the best wildflower display in the entire national park, and it was off trail and a beautiful spot with, a wonderful lake behind it and gorgeous peaks and just such a profusion of diverse wildflowers. And I showed up this one morning at the time when they should have been at peak, and it was mostly gravel and with lots of footsteps everywhere. And I thought, what in the world happened here? And then I thought, well, all these footsteps, where'd they come from? How do anyone even know about this place? And then it dawned on me, oh yeah, I've got pictures from this place in my gallery and in a couple books, and I talk about it. I just ruined this place. I brought all these people up here, and look, there's nothing growing here anymore. And I just felt sick to my stomach. And I went to the National Park Service, to some of my friends who worked high up, and said, I'm in this to celebrate the natural world, not to destroy it. Do I need to quit? And we ended up coming up with some basic guidelines for how I could continue to photograph in a responsible way that wouldn't continue to damage delicate places like this. But then over the next couple of years, 2013, 2014, 2015, we began to see damage happening all across the world, much as I had caused. And I thought, we've got to do something. What can we do? And every time I would get together with other photographers, we would all bemoan the latest place that had been trashed by huge crowds that had gone out to these delicate places. And we would say, well, what can we do? And everyone would go, I don't know. We can't do it. I don't know what we could do. And so in 2016, I made a decision. We needed to come up with a solution. And I started writing proposals and sending it out to photographers across the world. And in 2019, we had an official meeting of a bunch of nature photographers, and we formed something called Nature First, that is dedicated to the promotion of responsible nature photography. We developed a set of principles for how do we take photographs in the wild in a way that celebrates the natural world without destroying it and without unintentionally damaging these areas. And basically we worked backwards. We saw the problems, and then we worked backwards from those to kind of come out with some general principles that could be applied across the globe, because the problems had become global with the launch of social media. And anyway, so we started that organization, and today I think we have people who are committed themselves to following those principles in over 72 nations. And we've had a lot of activity over these last years. And so check out the website, and if you're interested, consider joining. There's no fee. It's actually much more costly than that. What we ask is that you commit to practicing responsible nature photography. And we're called Nature First because our first principle is to prioritize the well-being of nature over photography. A photograph is never more valuable than what you're photographing. And we often forget that in our excitement. But yeah, I don't know. Sort of just in conclusion, I've spent 19 years now photographing primarily Rocky Mountain National Park. And it has become my home. It's become a place that I'm deeply in love with. And doing that, focusing on one little place has been good, not just for my own photography, but it's helped me see the needs of this area and how I can play a part in contributing towards its long-term well-being. And, I've developed good relations with the National Park Service, and we sometimes are able to do some little bits of cooperation. It's always difficult dancing with a government agency, but and all of their restrictions. But I've also found that tourists that are visiting. We're now up to almost 5 million tourists. I live in a town of 10,000 people with 5 million visitors. It's a little overwhelming, and it's easy to get cynical, but I've tried to change my mind and say, okay, this is my audience. And how can it's not just to sell my work and pay my bills and my staff. It's all about how can I mobilize these visitors to be stewards of not only Rocky Mountain National Park, but to prioritize the well-being of wild lands. And we're slowly getting a lot of other people involved in that process. And so that's sort of become a big part of my mission these days. And that's what I hope to continue doing here in little Rocky Mountain National Park, my tiny little bit of wilderness. I'm kind of jealous of all of you, but down here, this little corner is a very special place that I love very deeply. So I'm going to stop and open it up for anyone who has questions of anything. Send me a doozy. I have nothing to hide. I'd love to answer any questions you might have.
Eric, quick question. Your Rocky Mountain National Park website, what is the web address on that?
RockyMountainNationalPark.com.
Thank you.
So, Eric, this is Carl. I've got a few questions here in the chat. I'll just go ahead and share with you, and I'll just start from the first. So, Julie was wondering what photographers inspire you, especially when you were getting started.
Oh my, that's 20 years ago. So things have sure changed over the years. I think back then it was people like John Shaw, Galen Rowell. I'm trying to think back then. Jack Dakinga, Munch, David Munch. Yeah, way back then it was those. But I think I was just as inspired by a lot of the paintings, whether it be Albert Bierstadt or some of the people from the Hudson River movement. Yeah, and then I just love nature. I love seeing beautiful things. So I don't know. And there's so many great photographers out today. In fact, I'm usually embarrassed to even show a lot of my work, but a lot of inspiration out there.
And then Kathy was wondering, she's planning a trip to Colorado in April and wanted to know what the park was like in mid-April.
Snowy. April is one of our snowiest months of the year. You can get warm days. What I would expect is the lower valleys of the park should be thawing out in between big snowstorms, and the mountains are going to look probably their best with draped and heavy snow in April. I love April.
Cool. And then John was wondering, who prints your images for your gallery and what media are you using?
Yeah, I spent years trying different companies and working with a lot of different places. And right now I'm working with a company called Duraplaq, Duraplaq. They happen to be located about an hour's drive from me, but they provide prints for all over the world for photographers. And I remember they came to me up to my gallery and wanted my business. And I came up with a 70-point checklist of things they needed to fulfill before I would sign up with them. And they've been terrific. And I've used them for now 12, maybe 15 years now, and very happy. And generally what I'm doing is I'm having my prints mounted on with a UV protective laminate out of the United Kingdom. It's very thin. It's a thin film, and then it's adhered to a wood background. And people walk into my gallery and they think, what am I looking at? Because it looks three-dimensional. There is no glare, to the pictures. And I usually have them standing about an inch off the wall, casting a shadow, and people seem to really like it. I've tried acrylics and metals and canvas and everything out there, but my plaques are what are selling in my gallery these days. Well, and for a decade now or more.
And then I had a question for you. You were talking earlier about some of the impacts you're seeing in the park due to climate change. One of the things that's really a huge climate change factor for us here, in addition to wildfire, is the increasing and the longer duration of spruce bark beetle infestations. And I know when I was there in 2009, I was seeing a lot of signs of that and the west side of the park. And I'm just wondering how the park is doing with bark beetle infestations.
It continues to be a real problem. Yeah, it originally hit our lodgepole in 2006 and 7, and just devastated large swaths. And then now it's the spruce beetle, and it's continuing to devastate large areas. And now we're seeing some problems even with our ponderosa. I don't think it's the same beetle. It's another beetle. I don't know which one, but yeah, all of our trees are getting just hammered. It's really hard to see. It's really painful. Yeah. So yeah,
Hey, Eric, I have a question too for you.
yeah.
Hey, before you answer though, just know this, if it's proprietary, I'm only 2 hours south of you in Monument, Colorado.
Oh, well, wonderful.
I'm just curious about your one favorite location and also your favorite fall aspen location.
Okay, let me think about that. You know, uh, when I talk about favorites, mine are usually somewhere that there's no trail and no people. I'm a hermit. And so I love to get far away. But one of my agreements with the national park is to only promote those areas that are on an official trail. And so if I was to stick to that, what I would say is my favorite area is Lake Nanita. And that is about a 13 or 14 mile hike from Bear Lake, or about, I think, an 11-mile hike from Grand Lake. It's way up there, but just a magnificent mountain lake. And you rarely see anyone up there. It's just, you just got to be ready for a 25-mile round trip hike. But Lake Nanita, I'd highly recommend. Aspen, Rocky Mountain National Park is not a great park for photographing aspen. I do it.
I agree. I agree, by the way.
It's not easy. And so I like to be in the Endo Valley, just up from Horseshoe Park. That's a great
Okay.
place. Or the Bierstadt Moraine, which everyone knows about, or along Highway 7. It's limited. I have a few other hidden spots out there, but even they are a little tricky and not great for aspen.
Okay, and just real quick for the group while I'm on here, most of you guys remember Nick Fucci, and I was up shooting with Nick Bighorn sheep with Nick last month in Montana, and I'm sure he would pass on a hello to everyone.
I was just talking to him on Facebook yesterday. This is Kathy.
Hey, Kathy, one other thing I'd throw out for you in April in Colorado. It's not really the most photographic month here in the state, but one of the places that actually kind of shines a little bit then is Great Sand Dunes National Park. Just something to think about.
Okay, great. Thanks. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, actually, when I went to Rocky Mountain in 2009 for my artist residency, I went ahead a few days, being a sea level liver, and remembering that a lot of the trailheads at Rocky Mountain are like 9,000 feet, and then you're climbing up from there. I spent a few days at Great Sand Dunes before going to Rocky Mountain just to give myself a chance to acclimate. What do you see with your gallery businesses, Erik, as kind of a recent or developing trend for what the consumer is interested in, because with the proliferation of digital photography, where everybody thinks they're a photographer now, and social media and all that kind of stuff, what trends, if any, do you see regarding the nature of your gallery business?
Well, I would say that I don't see many changes. I think I see a continuation of what we had before, which is it's primarily older people that are making the purchases. And these are people who aren't out there with cameras and maybe have mobility issues as well. We do get some, we do regularly get photographers in, and we get people in with their cell phones saying, oh yeah, look at this. I can take a picture. I took a picture just like this. But I think I'm not seeing a real change in terms. It's funny how consistent it is. Now, one of the things interesting about my little galleries is the audience that I'm serving is primarily coming from Texas, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Kansas, a lot of farming communities. And so what they're interested in is very different than what you'll find in some of the other, even parts of Colorado or other national parks. I'm finding a lot of the more abstract things that I love to photograph. I cannot sell. That people want something very literal. Generally, people want to purchase things at places they've been, things they've seen. They say, I sat on that rock, or I went to that lake, or our family always goes there. And so I end up photographing a lot of the more easily accessible places. And those sell really well. They don't excite me as much. I love to be seeing something no one has seen before, being out in an area no one else has. And I put those in the gallery, but I know that very likely they won't sell. So I'm often changing out those ones and keeping stable the ones that I know will sell, because they're those iconic locations. They become rather iconic over the years. So that's what we're seeing. And I find that our national park doesn't attract the high-end visitor. We don't, I look at galleries like Peter Lick would do, or some of the other big galleries, photography galleries that are out there. That just will not work in our town. We're dealing with families who are on tighter budgets, and once they start seeing something over a couple $1,000s, just no interest at all. So we have to keep a lot of real affordable options we try and do, as well as some of the a few high-end pieces as well.
Well, Eric, we can relate to that here in Anchorage, because 85% of our visitors spend their last dime to get here on a cruise ship.
Ouch. Ouch. Yeah, that's tough. Yeah. Were you hit hard this year by the economy?
Well, we actually this year we had it's been very interesting, because last year we didn't have a cruise ship season. We had a late cruise ship season, and the cruise ships were only doing round trips from Seattle to the southeastern part of the state. They weren't coming up to our part of the state where they normally do in the summer. But last year we saw record travel numbers to Anchorage from independent travelers. So people who were not coming up on cruise ships, people who were really wanted to travel abroad, but they weren't traveling abroad yet. So Alaska became their next best exotic destination they could go to. So we saw a lot of our economy doing well last summer. In fact, we weren't capable of handling visitation, whether it was hotel room availability, restaurants being understaffed and not being able to handle the volume, and not having any rental cars available. So we're got somewhat more back to normal this year, but we still have some shortages and staffing that aren't quite able to handle the return of the economy.
Sounds very similar to us. Yeah, very, very similar. Yeah.
Anybody else have any other questions for Eric? Well, again, Eric, thank you so much. I really appreciate, I think it's a valuable lesson for everybody to take, the notion of spending so much time with one place and becoming familiar with it. I think I can speak for myself. I often try to bite off more than I can chew. And I think you've shown us the value, not only from a creative standpoint, but a business standpoint, of becoming really good at one thing or one location, and being able to express it very well, and also balancing too, taking images, capturing images that satisfy you creatively, but also knowing which ones are necessary to satisfy you financially.
Exactly. And for me, that's one of the reasons I started doing books. I had a lot of pictures I liked, but I knew weren't going to sell as prints. And so I started doing books and could pair my writing with some of the photos I liked and even talk about sort of why I like them. And they ended up selling really well at that point. It's really funny. So yeah, it's finding that balance and finding new avenues to use art photography for me.
And you also have a really great diversity of writing, things that you write about, because you've got your more practical, the hiking guide that you highlighted, but you also have your kind of more contemplative, philosophical, almost kind of like John Muir sort of reflecting on nature writings and some of your smaller books that pair well with the photography.
Yeah. It started as just Facebook posts that I whenever I'm out there, I'm always writing, and I just started sharing some on Facebook. People liked them. I thought, give it a try. And so it's nice I'm always looking for, what do I enjoy and what am I passionate about, and how could I turn that around and use it as a business opportunity? And it seems to have worked well. So anyways, I thank you all for the chance to be here.
How many books have you now published, Eric?
Just 7.
Okay. I'm going to go to your I'm going to go to your Rocky Mountain site and order me one of those calendars. I saw that little ad there at the top, and I'm going to order me one.
Perfect. Would love to send some up to Alaska.
All right.
Well, a final thought for you, Eric. Some April, if you decide you don't want to go to Desert Southwest, that's still really good Northern Light season here in South Central Alaska.
Oh, I would love to come up. The thing I'm afraid of, if I come up, I might not want to leave, and then I'm going to have trouble with my wife and my family. So that's one of the reasons I'm holding off.
Well, it'll just become one of those other places you visit at other times of the year when you're not photographing there in Rocky Mountain National Park.
I would love that. Yeah. Hopefully I can make that happen one of these days. I'll stop up and see you, Carl.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much, Eric, for joining us tonight. I appreciate it. And Kathy, I'll pass this back to you.
And Eric, there's a lot of
everyone.
thanks in the comment section too from people.
Okay. I'll take a look.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be down in Colorado in mid-April, so I'm just I have a friend and who's going to meet me down, who lives down there. So we'll have to go check out some of these places and stuff. And actually, I do believe that Margaret is running this meeting as her last meeting. And just so you know, I posted all of the people who are running for the board. I sent that to everybody. So if you need to see the slate of people that are interested in being board members, you can just go into the chat. And I don't remember how we were going to do this, Margaret, but maybe you can help me with that. As far as, do we just ask everybody to vote?
We've done it both ways. We've done it just by a show of hands on here, or probably just easier in the chat saying
Carl,
yes
you're
or
on mute.
no.
Madam Chair, I have a motion.
Go ahead.
I move to accept by acclamation the slate of candidates listed in the chat.
Could everybody who agrees with that or wants to support that, or
Need a second.
we need a second first? And then,
This is Kathy. I'll second that motion.
okay, thank you, Kathy. And now if everybody could either say yes or no in the comments, we can count them up and see if it passes. When we do this in person, it's, just everybody yells out yay or nay in the auditorium. So,
Well, everybody could just get off mute and say yay or nay.
I think that we can.
And if we don't, or just put their thumb up, put your face on there and just, here, let me show you.
And if you wanted to have
Bill
it
Rohn
private,
has it, just put your thumb up. Or say yay or nay, but yeah. Oh, look, hi, Leanne. So good to see your face. Ed and Georgia have their thumbs up. Yay. John, Anita, we need your thumb up there.
or down.
Might be easier to say who opposes.
We have, yeah, actually, we should have just done that. So we have lots of yays there. And Colin,
Any opposed?
I might ask you, do you have any interest in being a board member with ASONP? Colin Tyler, you're on mute.
Oh. Yeah, certainly. If there's still room.
We have one more person. We have a slate of 12, but we can take up to 13. So if you're interested, we'd like to add Colin to the list if everybody's okay with that.
I accept that friendly amendment as the original.
Thank you.
Okay.
I accept it as well.
I
Do we-
accept it as well also.
Do we have any nays, any no's?
I haven't seen any in the chat. If
Okay,
anybody
I-
has a no, you can send it to me privately if you prefer.
Well,
I
in that
would
case,
say-
I would say the
Safe to
motion
the motion's
passes.
carried. Yeah.
That's it. Motion carries.
Woohoo! Merry
Thank you,
Christmas,
everyone.
everybody. We have a new slate of 13 board members. Thank goodness. This is fabulous.
That's wonderful to have new people in here. Thank you guys. And have everybody else coming back. And like Kathy said, this is my last meeting as president, hopefully. Although if we're having our board meeting late next month, it might not be. But I can't actually get to the live ones, and it's hard to lead it from on Zoom when you guys are meeting live. So I pop in, but it's kind of late here. It's 10
Yeah.
o'clock. So it's good to see
Well,
everybody.
Margaret, you've been a
Thank you
great
at that time.
president. We've enjoyed having you as president for all these years. She's done a great job. And we know that you want to stay on as a board member. So, you know, not much will change.
Okay, anybody have anything else they wanted to jump in with before we go to photos?
Oh, yeah, we have.
Just a couple of quick reminders or announcements about upcoming presentations. So January is going to be Brian Adams, who is going to do a presentation about his I Am Inuit or I Am Inupiat project. He was a Rasmussen Foundation fellow grant recipient and worked on that project using those funds. February is going to be Jamin Hunter Taylor, who is going to do a presentation on success with wildlife photography in marginal light, as in less than ideal light. And then, of course, March will be the juror for Alaska Wild.
And in April, what are we doing, Carl?
I think it's something you're doing, Kathy.
Well, actually, it's a collaborative. There were 8 of us from ASONP that went to Brazil together to photograph jaguars and harpy eagles and many other wildlife things. And so we're doing a collaborative of our work from our Brazil trip that was last month. So there you have it.
Cool.
And then I don't know, do we have anybody for May yet?
Not yet.
All right. I have some ideas. We'll talk, Carl.
Alrighty.
And our juror's name is Jessica Ricks.
And she's an instructor with Rocky Mountain School of Photography, so she should be a great workshop instructor. For those of you who missed that, she's going to be coming up here in March, and she's going to be teaching a workshop while she's here. So we're excited about that.
More details to come.
Ellen, how many people do we have to show images?
We have 10 images from Colin Tyler. That's it. All right.
All right, there we go.
All right, Colin, you want to take over? And I'll do
Take
the,
it from here. Thank you.
okay.
This is from one of my adventures earlier this year. This is Svalbard, north of Svalbard, actually, into the polar ice pack. We were beyond 82 degrees north latitude. The ship went into the ice pack and we watched this bear walk across moving ice. It was incredible. So it was probably a highlight from that trip. That was in August. Julie Jessen arrived there like 2 days after I left. We just missed each other.
Wow.
But that was Svalbard.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Also Svalbard. First time I've seen walrus in the wild and had a lot of opportunities with them. That was neat. Okay. Local. This is Chugach State Park, Eagle River. Yeah, this was this last fall. Little cub. His mother just fed it a salmon. Okay, and that will be, if you go back, you've heard I'm working on a book about the Nature Center. It's in the design process right now. Hope to have it in the spring. That image will certainly be in the book. So that's my big exciting news.
Hmm.
And I was just nominated for the board. This was in coastal Namibia. This is October. It's my second trip to Namibia, first time leading a tour there. And before the clients showed up, my business partner and I arrived early to take care of some business with the tourism board. And we went down to the coast, Luderitz, and a lot of flamingos on the coast. We also visited the ghost town of Kolmanskop, the German mining town. That was incredible. It's a very windy day though, so we didn't dare take our cameras out in the sand. But anyway, this is coastal Namibia. All right. Cheetah posing for me here. This is in Nankusi Wildlife Sanctuary. They have a large cheetah pen at Nura's Lodge where we stayed with our clients the first 2 nights. And they have 7 cheetahs in this very large pen. They were like naughty cheetahs that were killing livestock or what have you. Instead of euthanizing them, they were brought here. Some of them were pets. Cheetahs don't make good pets. But anyway, we got to go to the evening feeding, and that was neat to watch. Okay. This is Susisfly, the famous dry ancient lake bed in Namibia, in the Namib Desert, the world's oldest desert. All right.
Termite?
Yet cheetah cub on a termite mound. This is in northern Namibia, Anguma Wildlife Sanctuary, Wildlife Preserve. There was a mother with 4 cubs, and they were eating an impala. So that was a pretty cool experience. My first time seeing cheetahs in the wild. All right. Giraffe in Etosha National Park. Directly behind me was a water hole with dozens of giraffes and hundreds of zebras, all kinds of wildlife. But I like this one isolated, and I use a polarizer and a wide angle lens to really bring out the sky and the clouds. Okay. And this is Etosha National Park, middle of the day when it's really bright and really hot. And I just went with the high key lighting situation, high contrast, and just really went with a sense of place with the bright highlights. Zebras fighting, they fight a lot.
Yep. I think that was your last. Nope.
One more, this is my favorite. There were a pride of lions. They just finished, they had been eating. You could see blood in their fur and their manes, and we're drinking from a water hole. Directly behind them is the Etosha Pan. It's a giant, massive dry lake bed. It makes up about 20% of the park. And so middle of the day, they find shade and then go hunt again in the evening. So they were gathering under the camel thorn tree. So I think that's it.
Yep, that was it. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you.
Very cool pictures, Colin.
Thank you.
So I think that wraps it up for tonight, unless anybody's got something else to throw in.
Anybody got an announcements before Christmas? Well, welcome all the new board members. I see Corey out there, so we're really happy to have you on board. He's one of our newest board members. And all the old members coming back. And thanks, Colin, for joining us. We'll be reaching out. We'll be reaching out to you soon. I think I have your email address from all the stuff you send me. And just remember, if anybody has anything for the e-news, to send me an email and I'll try to get it. If you can, try to send it by Friday. It always helps if I can get it set up before the weekend, because sometimes I forget otherwise. So anyway, happy holidays, everybody.
Yep. Everybody have a Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays. Thank you.
Merry
See you in
Christmas,
Georgia
everybody.
tomorrow.